Okay, today we're looking at the Constitutional Convention. Now, the first thing to remember is the Constitution was not our first written form of government in America. The Articles of Confederation was. Remember that from last week. Remember there were several flaws in the Articles of Confederation, so the states decide to get together, and originally it is to tweak or change the Articles of Confederation. However, once they get there, they see that the Articles is such a flawed document that it cannot be changed enough to be efficient, so they decide to get rid of the Articles completely, write an entirely new document called the Constitution. The first thing I can tell you about the Constitution, and what we're going to spend the majority of our time looking at today, is the fact that the Constitution is a huge compromise. If people did not compromise, there would still not be a Constitution today. This took a great deal of compromise from a lot of different people, such as states with small populations versus states with large populations, such as states that had slaves and states that did not have slaves, such as states that were scared of a new constitution having too much power versus states that wanted a constitution that gave the federal government more power. So we're going to look at all those different compromises in today's page of notes. Okay, the meeting is held in Philadelphia, May of 1787. I've said this before. Any early meetings, Philadelphia is always a good choice if you don't know the answer. 12 of the 13 states attend the Constitutional Convention. Rhode Island is absent out of protest. They do not want a new government. They want to keep the Articles. They like the Articles the way it is. There are 55 delegates total at the convention from 12 different states. For the Constitution to become law, 9 out of 13 states had to agree to ratify the Constitution before it would become law. A couple things on that. One, think about the compromises that we're going to look at. Had they not have compromised, you would have never got to 9. Okay, so there's a great deal of compromise went on. 2, tidbit of information, North Carolina is the 12th out of 13 states to ratify the Constitution. North Carolina did not ratify the Constitution until it had the Bill of Rights added to it, and until it was decided that George Washington would become the president. Okay, decisions made. I've already said before, when they originally get to Philadelphia, their goal is to tweak, change the Articles of Confederation to make it a better document. It was not to scrap it. Once they get there, they decide that it is such a flawed document, they're going to do away with it, and they're going to write a totally new Constitution. 1 vote per state, 9 out of 13 to ratify it. They decide to keep the meeting a secret because of the chaos that that could bring. Imagine a country hearing that they had no document in place to protect it or take care of it, since they have basically scrapped the Articles of Confederation. Majority rules on everything. Okay, issues that are debate, and this is what I'm talking about when I say compromise. This is the compromises between different groups of people. Representation, and what that means is representation in Congress, and your debate or your compromise is going to have to come between your large states and your small states. Now, I don't mean large and small as far as size of the state. I mean large and small as far as population. Okay, large states, I mean states that have more people. Small states, I mean states that have less people. Slavery, obviously this is a compromise between the North and the South. Economics is going to be between the North and the South, basically. And then the last one to look at is the strength of the government, and that is your Federalists versus your Anti-Federalists. These are people that the Federalists want this stronger new government versus the Anti-Federalists, who are afraid that this new government will lead us right back down the same road we went down when we were British colonies. So they are the anti-federalists. They are against this new constitution, giving the federal government more power. So today we're going to go through and break down all of these different compromises. The first one we're going to look at is the representation between large states and small states. Okay, the first plan proposed is proposed by James Madison, who is also known as the father of the Constitution. He proposes a 3-branch legislature, a bicameral Congress, which means a 2-house Congress, and he proposes that both houses be based on population. So the more people you have in your state, the more people in Congress you would get. So obviously this makes the large states happy and the small states upset. So the small states are going to propose a different plan. They're going to propose the New Jersey plan, which is a small state plan, which proposes equal voting for all states regardless of a state's population. They're going to promote states' rights, and they believe in a constitution that's going to look similar to what the Articles look like, with the states having the majority of the power. So the compromise between the large states and the small states is known as the Great Compromise. And here is how they break that down. They have a bicameral legislature, which means 2 houses. They have a House of Representatives, which is done by population. So this makes the large states happy because their population will get them more members in the House of Representatives. The second house in their bicameral legislature is called the Senate, and it is done equally. Each state gets 2 senators, so there are 100 total today. Okay, and this is the compromise that they come up with. Both sides get something, but not everything that they want. The 3/5 compromise is the compromise between slave states versus free states. The slave states want slaves to count towards population because that will help them in the House of Representatives. Obviously, the northern states who do not have slaves do not want the slaves to count. 1, because they're not treated as citizens, and 2, because that would hurt them in any vote in the House of Representatives. So their compromise is any slave can be counted as 3/5 of a person for population, but for every slave that you count, you must pay a tax on that slave. The new government is much stronger. The federal government has a great deal more power. The federal government has the power to tax its citizens. Remember, we said that was a big problem under the Articles. Without the power to tax, there was no military. Very hard to enforce laws. Remember Shays' Rebellion. So this power to tax is going to give the government a lot more power, and it's also going to give it the power to protect itself. It has a strong executive, a president, even though that was something that the colonists were very scared of to begin with. And it needed 9 out of 13 to ratify, and it does get that. Eventually, all 13 states ratify the Constitution. And like I told you before, North Carolina is the 12th out of 13 to ratify the Constitution. 2 groups of people that I talked about a minute ago, the Federalist and Anti-Federalist. The Federalists, they want this Constitution. They want this stronger federal government. They believe that the power should be with the government, probably because they believe in more educated people running the country more than anything else. And then you have the Anti-Federalists who like the Articles and are scared of the government having too much power. They fear a colonial Great Britain type of problem again. The compromise between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists ends up being the Bill of Rights. The Federalists go to the Anti-Federalists and they say, okay, what rights are you afraid of losing? And they say, write those rights down. So the Anti-Federalists get together and they write down the rights that they are afraid of a constitution or a stronger federal government taking away from them. And how they compromise is they write the Bill of Rights, which is the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and they guarantee that those rights will never be taken away from the people. And after this, the Anti-Federalists or Anti-Federalist states feel safe enough with this new Constitution to ratify it. So that is the compromise between the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist. So let's go back to our second slide here, and talk about our issues at debate. The large states and the small states debate representation in Congress, and it is settled with the Great Compromise. Slavery between the northern states and the southern states is settled with the Three-Fifths Compromise. The strength of government issue between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists is compromised with the Bill of Rights, so the first 10 amendments to the Constitution.